I realize it's a couple of minutes past 9 a.m. We are scheduled to start at 9 a.m., but we're waiting for Matt to kick things off with a few comments. So, Matt.
Appreciate it. Yeah, so we'll save a lot of the ITS Georgia announcements until lunch, just since we'll have a nice big crowd at that point. Is either on your laptop or on your smartphone, whichever you prefer. Is whip it out. Use your you go to your favorite browser of choice, be it Safari, Google. People not doing it. I'm looking around. I'm looking. Not doing that. All right, and just Google GDOT Big Data. When you go there, that is GDOT and ARC's homepage for all of this stuff. This is not a trick. This isn't a scam. GDOT, ARC pool their money and buy data for the benefit of the transportation community in Georgia. If you are working on a public sector project in the state of Georgia that is transportation related, this data is available to you for free. Again, not a catch. It's available to you for free. They want you to use it. It helps drive down costs for all the projects across the board.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So when you go there, it's a wonderful homepage. If you scroll on down, there's an area that says Obtain Access. It's a little flow chart that walks you all the way through it. It's very easy to do, but if at any point, and believe me, people do get stuck along the way, if you need help, you can reach out to datasupport@dot.ga.gov and just say, I'm stuck, I need help. And there will be someone on the other side of that to help walk you through the process. But the things that we'll be walking through today, this will be for RITIS. So we'll be doing trip analytics, probe data analytics, speed analytics, a whole slew of really great things. There's even more than that, right? There is high resolution aerial imagery. There is freight data. There is volume estimation data. So take advantage of it. They want you to use this for your projects. It helps speed up procurements for you because you don't have to worry about it on a project by project level. And honestly, as soon as you get your task order signed, if you're a consultant, you can be immediately hopping in and start looking at this. If you're doing a quick response project and have some ideas, you can use it, right? It doesn't cost you any money. So again, please, please, please take advantage of that. In there as well are a bunch of free training opportunities, tutorials, use cases, templates. They've really rolled out the red carpet for the transportation industry here, so take advantage of that. And one of those, again, through their contract with the CATT lab is trainings like this that Rick was getting ready to launch. So with that, I'll be in the back as we're going through this. If you guys have any questions, if you want to poke and prod me about what I just said, happy to help. And if you're curious of whether or not you already have an account, if whether or not you have a data use agreement in place, all that stuff, again, I'm happy to help walk you through that. So with that, Rick, handing it to you, and then we'll do our bigger announcements here. There is one thing that Mary told me to remind everyone, which is we forgot the sign-in sheet. So how are we?
There's a QR code that Rick has that we can use to sign in on.
Beautiful. So there's a QR code that will be coming up. Use that to sign in to make sure that you get registered for your PDHs. There's, I think, 4 that come out of this one, 3 or 4 this morning and 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So plenty to take advantage of.
Awesome.
Rick, off to you.
Thank you, Matthew. All right, good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Good morning. Good morning. Well, thank you, Matt, for the kind introduction. It was a pseudo introduction. He just said Rick Ayers. For those of you who don't know me, maybe a handful of you I've met in the past. My name is Rick Ayers. I work for the Center for Advanced Transportation Technology Lab. We're with the University of Maryland. We are the software firm that's responsible for RITIS, which is the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System, which is an enterprise suite of big data analytics, mobility data analytics tools and solutions. Everything's web-based. Today we're going to We've broken the day into two halves. So the first half of the day, we're going to talk about solutions that help with understanding origin destination patterns, trip and route path patterns through some data that the state has subscribed to from INRIX. And in the afternoon, we're going to focus on a solution or a series of tools, part of our solution called Probe Data Analytics, a bunch of tools there to analyze performance measures across corridors and roads within the state of Georgia, or even across your border. One of my roles for the CATT Lab is doing this, professional development, training, and engagement. Me, travel all over the country. State DOTs all over the country use this platform. It's, so how you guys are using it is the technology platform is being used by states all over the country to support similar efforts. Before I get into content and slides and exercises and things like that, I want to make sure that everyone has login credentials for RITIS. Show of hands, who does not have credentials?
A quick question before the credentials. Is there like a Wi-Fi access code, something that we could, working on that right now. One step before.
Okay, so you're not connected to the
To the web, no.
to the internet? Is
We're working on the Wi-Fi. Give us a second.
oh,
Sorry.
working on the Wi-Fi. So that's anyone not have RITIS credentials? All right, one, couple, 2, 3, 4. All right, so for the benefit of you four, I'm going to jump out. If you navigate, open a browser and navigate to ritis.org, www.ritis, which by the way stands for the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System. If you navigate to ritis.org, you'll get to the login page. Right here, there's a request account link, and just click that request an account. Fill in your work-related info. So don't put your personal email address in here. Make sure that you put your work-related email address. If you're a GDOT employee, you will be approved automatically because you're a GDOT employee. Any of you raise your hands, not GDOT employees? Okay. Well, that. Yeah, ARC will be automatic. GDOT will be automatic. There are some consulting firms that if you're a consulting firm, you should be automatic if there's already a data use agreement in place. But
So if you need help, you can come over and I can look your account up in the back. And if you don't, then this goes to my previous comment of Google GDOT Big Data and walk you through the process of getting a data use agreement executed. But like I said, if you guys come on back and I can help you guys out.
so is it gdotbigdata.com?
Nope, just literally Google individual words, GDOT space big space.
Oh.
There you go, join agency, boom, right there.
Oh, cool.
And you scroll on down, Rick, over there on the left where it says obtain data access. Click on that. And this handy dandy flowchart walks you through how to do it depending on the type of person that you are. If you're a government agency, it walks you through a slightly different process. If you're a
Consultant, contractor.
University person, there's a second process for you.
Very nice. Thank you, Matt.
Had that posted earlier.
Yeah, everything's web-based. So, and we are gonna do some hands-on work together towards the latter part of this morning. What I am kind of a preemptive thing. What I am gonna ask is that for this morning, I'm gonna have you guys walking through setting up a query. Like everything in RITIS is all about setting up and configuring queries to run your analysis. And there are spatial and temporal parameters, part of every query. Well, for this morning, as we walk through setting up a query, I'm gonna ask that you not hit submit. Because with, I don't know, 50 of you hammering our back-end servers all at once, that would not be cool. So I've pre-prepared some analysis based on the exercise, the follow-along exercise that we're gonna work with, okay? So do not run analysis today, please. We can probably handle it, but on our back end, the issue is that you're just not going to see any results for several minutes on your end, on the client side. All right, so while I put in this fancy QR code, oh, Kent, are you guys picking up the video and the audio? Okay, so we're set with that. So this QR code takes you to a website that I set up with all the resources for this morning session and this afternoon session. What I didn't think through is that if you're on a laptop, how are you going to get the URL? How are you going to get the URL for all of those resources? So I'm going to jump back out really quickly so that you can open a browser and navigate to basically that URL right there. So go ahead and navigate to, open a tab, navigate to sites.google.com/umd.edu/RITIS-training. I was trying to figure out, there's so much content that I developed for this morning and this afternoon session. I was trying to figure out how to share that with you guys, and I'm a big AI fan. Grok is my kind of AI of choice. And so I said, hey, Grok, what are some easy ways to use a QR code to reference a bunch of documents? And it said, hey, try Google Sites. And University of Maryland, you can't read it? Oh, it's too small. I'm sorry. Why don't I put it in this? There you go. You're welcome. So I said, try Google Sites. Well, the University of Maryland, which the CATT lab is part of, we're a Google customer. This is a really cool tool to use. Super easy. So if you haven't tried Google Sites, give it a whirl. Everybody good with that URL? That URL, once you open it, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a link to training by state. Click that. Expand 2025. And you're the first to be in 2025 because I just started doing this. Website? Yep. Thank you, Mary, for getting this set up. Good. So once you get to state training by state, every single one of these bullets this morning, We're basically the fourth bullet down. You got a PDF of this morning's slide deck. There's an MP4 of the slides. I integrate a lot of video demos into my slide decks, so the MP4 for later reference contains those video demos. This is a link to the follow-on exercise, which we'll get into in a little bit. This is a map app that I developed as a result of some analysis that we're going to run together later this morning. Let's go ahead and click on this guy, sign-in sheet for PDH credit hours. If you click that, ooh, everybody's already entering their...
Put that back up again. I still have it up to the UMD.
Yeah, you are welcome. sites.google.com/umd.edu, RITIS-training. You good? Good? Well, I see that Google Sheets is working. Thank you. Stephen, is the C there because you're contemplating attending the afternoon? Stephen Sheffield? Or should I, where's Stephen? Okay, I'll change it. All right, thanks everyone. This is really cool to watch this. All right, so this is our registration sheet that Matt and Mary talked about. If you haven't had a chance, don't worry about it now, but you at least have an opportunity to kind of update that as you go. All right, let's get into the meat of things, shall we? All right, so I introduced myself. Again, work for the CATT Lab. I've been with the CATT Lab for about 6 years. This is one of my primary responsibilities. I'm super grateful to Mary and to Matt for helping to organize this for all of you. Just kind of setting the stage here as we get going. If you have any questions, I'd love for this to be interactive. So just say, hey, Rick, hold up a minute. I don't quite understand that. Can you pause and explain that a little bit more? If I can't answer the question, I'll figure out an answer and maybe follow up with you at a later time. Which reminds me, I should pull out my notebook. Quick show of hands.
It's doing it again.
Oh, did we? So we need to
Go to,
double. Oh no, and the
maybe go to
presentation again,
Yeah.
right?
Well, do the setup. No, let escape out. Let's do it in the setup. So each time you pull it up, you don't have to do that. Go to slideshow. Uncheck use presenter view. All right.
Okay.
And now start your presentation. Let's see if that.
Because you were getting it. Okay, cool. Thank you. Any of you familiar with the CATT Lab? Or not familiar with the CATT Lab? Don't know who we are? No? Everybody's got a pretty good sense? Yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. Everything that I'm going to share with you today, all the technology that we're going to work through, it's all we do. We're not a consulting firm. You can't buy this software if you're private sector. You can only license it if you're a public sector company. So we are super passionate. The CATT Lab is crazy passionate about what I'm sharing with you today. That's all we do. There's 100 of us sitting at the University of Maryland, College Park, banging out code and updating software so that you guys can do some of the things that I'm going to share with you today. I kind of like to talk about the platform in general before we get into some of the details. This is a conceptual architecture diagram of RITIS. Now, I'm going to step away from my mic for a little bit. There's a lot of stuff that goes into RITIS and that blue rectangle, a lot of stuff. But the important thing to remember, up above that blue rectangle is data. We're not a data provider. Matt was talking about, you know, big data and all the data resources that are available to you guys. We're the integrator of data and archiver of data and a solution developer. Everything above that blue box is data. The data that comes from you guys, authoritative content, like your CCTV feeds. We're integrating your speed and volume sensors that are distributed across your interstate network. Your ATMS system, we're tapped into that. We've got a direct connection to incidents that are reported, work zone related data. Today we're going to talk in our exercise, follow along exercise, we're going to talk about work zones from an operations perspective and maybe how to leverage some of these tools in support of maintenance and operations. But we're also an integrator of third-party data like trip and waypoint data, which we're talking about this morning, as well as probe speed data, which we'll talk about in the afternoon, but also national data sources. So Waze event data. Did you know that we're pulling in Waze data? Every crowdsourced report through Waze is available to you through RITIS. Everything that gets reported is reported live through Traffic Map and archived by RITIS. There's also national weather-related data content from the National Weather Service. I don't know, hey, Matt, do you know, do we integrate any of the states? Does the state have any of its own RWIS sensors, and it is integrated? Okay, so road weather information systems and sensors. We've got the national network that we're integrating, plus GDOT specific RWIS sensor data. Interestingly, on RWIS, you can see RWIS sensor data and get real-time information for that point-specific RWIS station. We're archiving that data, but we don't we don't have a web solution to query it. Anyway, sort of an interesting nuance. Transit data, also something that we integrate in real time and archive. All of this data that comes from you, authoritative content from GDOT, content from third-party data sources like here. Yeah, you guys are here, probe speed data consumers and users. And on the trip side, you're an INRIX trip waypoint data. All of this content gets brought into RITIS, the Regional Integrated Transportation Information System. What we do is we archive all of that. And then we built out all of these cool tools that you're going to see later that help you query it. This is like massive amounts of data. Probe data, waypoint data. It's unbelievable what gets integrated and archived. But what we've done, the way we've kind of normalized it all, is we've structured it in such a way so that it's easy for you to query it and generate performance measure metrics and reports. And some really nice data visualizations for that matter, which is kind of our strong suit is data visualizations. You know what? I forgot to mention, by the way, if I shake your hand later, I'm not contagious. Everyone's probably wondering, what the hell happened to Rick? So, it's not contagious. I'm getting radiation treatments for basal cell carcinoma. Anybody had basal cell before? Had to have Mohs surgery? So I'm a white guy from California is where I grew up. I didn't know what sunscreen was until well after my 30s. So I've got a dermatologist carving on me all the time. But something new, if you ever get basal cell, is it's called image-guided subsurface radiological treatment. And it's basically X-ray treatments, so they don't have to carve you. So that, it's a little angry right now, which is why I have a Band-Aid. I wanted to mention that so that it's obvious, but kind of set aside any concerns about infecting anyone. So this morning we're talking about trip analytics. It's going to be the focus of this morning's session. This morning's data that we'll be working with in context to the solution within RITIS called trip analytics is different than the data we'll be using this afternoon. It's different but the same. It's kind of interesting. All the data that we're working with this morning and this afternoon is from connected vehicles. It's connected vehicle related data. And so we're gonna do a quick survey here. You got your QR code ready? Oh, let's see. This is supposed to work. Huh, I wonder if this isn't working because I'm only in presentation mode. It's supposed to bring up a survey. Oh well. How many of you are familiar with probe data? Think you know what it is? Pretty good sense. So connected vehicle probe data largely these days comes from on-vehicle GPS devices. Most cars that roll off the manufacturing floor from GM, Toyota, Honda, Audi, Volkswagen Group, all of them, Tesla, every car has one or more GPS devices on the car. It may not be providing navigation assistance or aid. You may not have an onboard nav system, but there's a GPS device on the car. And that GPS device is providing key safety-related telematics back to the original equipment manufacturer, providing that data back to Honda, back to GM, back to Ford, so that they can improve the safety and reliability of their vehicles. The other data, some of that data is the location of the vehicle, its heading, and its speed that's being dropped by the vehicle anywhere from 3 to 15 seconds. The OEMs are picking that up. They don't know who you are. They just know that one of their vehicles is dropping these coordinates, and it's dropping these coordinates with speed and heading associated with them every 3 to 10 seconds. Now, connected vehicle probe data, there's always the question, well, Rick, what's the term in the industry is penetration rate. Well, what's the penetration rate of connected vehicles? Well, does it really matter? No, that's not the response. Imagine trying to put a tube counter on every road in the state of Georgia. You can't do it. Probe data is like having a tube counter or inductive loop counter or some sort of video system that's doing AI counting of vehicles periodically. Now, I love this animation because it's a great illustration of what is a representative, statistically significant representation of probe vehicles on our roadways. Look at the red cars in this animation. The red cars are your connected vehicle probe counters. Every single one of those junctions in that animation, those red cars are moving at the same speed with the other cars around them, right? Do I need all the other cars to help me understand the speed on all of those overpasses and the interstate? No, because the red cars are telling me that. The red car is the CV data. The red car is the connected vehicle data point. The red car is statistically significant in terms of its representation of what's going on from a speed perspective on the roads. This is an animation of waypoints on waypoints for one trip. So this morning's data is coming from waypoint data and trip data, OD data, comes from INRIX. This animation that I built out is from waypoints. I think it's 3 to 5 second waypoint data for one trip. Look at the bottom of this slide. That's not correct. Bottom of that slide represents, it tells you INRIX has got relationships with a number of OEMs. And they're collecting about 200 million of these things every single day. Now watch this animation. Every single one of these, you're seeing color-coded waypoints. These are individual XY coordinate waypoints with speed and heading associated with them. And I just dropped this stuff in ArcGIS Online to create and time enabled it. But this one trip, you could see the speed. You see how it's green? That vehicle's going faster. We're on the eastern shore of Maryland right now. As it gets to a signalized intersection, you'll see this vehicle slow down. It's going to have a split failure right there. It had to stop, it had to wait through 2 phases. It went through St. Michael's, slowed way down through St. Michael's, and then the vehicle got to its destination. All of I mean, there's several thousand waypoints that went into that one trip. And the data that we're going to be working with today, this morning, you've got access to about 200 million of those that's collected by INRIX every single day. It's not 200 million through Georgia, but it's a lot of trips. My point in sharing this with you is to kind of help you get your head around what the source of the data is, the magnitude of the data, its statistical significance with regard to the representation of what's happening on your roadways, but also this idea that, you know, RITIS has archived all this waypoint data, and we've provided you these really terrific tools to query this big data in a fairly easy format. Now then, so I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Number one, my son and his girlfriend live in Oahu, and so I was worried about tsunami coming on shore. They were talking about 12-foot waves, and it wasn't that bad at all. But while I'm up thinking about my son and his girlfriend and their safety, I'm noodling what I'm going to share with you guys today. And I changed this slide at about 12 o'clock this morning. And if you stick around this afternoon, there's very similar slide in this afternoon's slide deck, but the right side is different. So we talked about waypoint data. That's what the graphic on the left represents. All those GPS kind of breadcrumbs. That's what INRIX is picking up from all of the OEM partners that they buy data from. The graphic on what INRIX does, their secret sauce, at least with this data that we're going to be working with, this OD trip data, they take all of those waypoints and then we create routes or paths.
A question from the online stream.
Yeah.
They asked, Rick, you mentioned the
So there's a quite online question, kind of getting back to that animation of the red vehicle, kind of moving with the flow of at the same speed as all the other vehicles around it. It's just an illustration of, generally speaking, when a vehicle is next to another vehicle, it's going to be moving at the same speed of that vehicle. Although there are more vehicles on the road within a specific area, and we could talk about how probe speed data is calculated, and it's kind of a good segue relative to this slide. Probe speed data is calculated differently than the data we're going to work with this morning. This morning, we are working with observed trips, observed waypoint breadcrumb droppings. We and INRIX have taken these breadcrumbs. Remember that, that trip over the St. Michael's that I had that animation for? That's the right side. All of those color-coded dots, INRIX takes every single trip and they associate those waypoints to what roads those waypoints fall on, and that becomes the trip from the beginning to the end. Now, again, there's some secret sauce and secret magic that they put to correlating or conflating the waypoints to a road segment, but that's what's going on in the back end. And what you're going to have access to with trip analytics and the underlying data are the routes and the trips themselves. The routes and the trips of observed waypoint, observed connected vehicle trips. It's not averaged, it's not it's not modeled. This is real data, real observed trips. We don't need to talk about this. And that's, yes, sir.
So it's learning over time, Like the more waypoints you have, the more history you have.
Well, on the back end, we certainly, INRIX is the data provider. They collect and aggregate from OEMs. There is some mobile.
I pulled data 5 years ago for the same route.
You're going to have a hell of a lot more today.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. A heck of a lot more today. I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Rob.
So Rob asked, hey, is there some learning going on in a sense for collecting this waypoint data? It's not learning, there's just more waypoint data that's being collected by INRIX, right? They have more relationships. So these relationships with OEMs, they're collecting more data because of their contracts with OEMs. But there are some smartphone apps that collect location-based information that also augments some of this waypoint-based data. Anytime you install an app on your mobile phone, one of the first things for a long time you had to do is agree to what? Location-based services, location-based tracking. And that's it's almost automatic for all apps. All those apps that are collecting your whereabouts, guess what? They're selling that stuff. They're selling the XY, XYZ, and just XYZ and timestamps. If you have the XYZ and a timestamp, guess what? You can derive for an individual MAC address its speed and its heading and all that other stuff. So super cool stuff on the back end. We at RITIS, we've just put the front end on you guys being able to query all of this massive data. Yes? On your device? Yeah. I don't know how the app providers would deal with that. Your car is your car, so you can't VPN your car. But if you do, You're smart. Oh, yeah, insurance providers, they're insurance companies are big sources for a lot of this data these days. I don't know. It may or may not pick it up. It's really, it's not relevant compared to the millions of other users of that app. So these testimonials that are on this slide kind of regroup and restate. This data that you're going to work with is observed data. Again, no averaging, no modeling. There's nothing else like it in the market. These are real trips captured, recorded from real vehicles. This data set is only vehicle data. Okay? This afternoon, we've got different sources that augment the vehicle data, but this morning's data source is just vehicles, because we need for trip-based data, you need a high frequency. So you need about anywhere from 3 to 15 second frequency in order to derive a route or a trip, okay? But this is significant, right? Because there's some performance measures that you'll get out of trip analytics that are things like travel time, speed. You'll get 95th and 5th percentile values for travel times. They're not averaged. They're actual speeds for the trip and for different segments. And it's crazy data. So while typical probe speed data is averaged from a harmonic mean perspective relative to a road segment, this data is observed. It's like what the vehicle actually was dropping from a waypoint coordinate perspective. Does that make sense? Any questions about that from a data perspective? Now we're going to start to get into Rob, right? Yeah, sorry.
Does it include like time of day, like all the crazy folks that drive 100 miles an hour on 285 on the east side at 10 p.m.?
So, so the question was, does the underlying waypoint data that we're working with today or probe speed data reflect excessive speed? The answer is yes, but it's excessive speed analysis is more appropriate with probe data analytics and probe speed-based data that we'll get into this afternoon. In fact, I've done some really cool training sessions and workshops on using probe data analytics for determining where excessive speed is happening and using probe data analytics to determine the efficacy of countermeasures. Like, oh, hey, we had countermeasures implemented here, road realignment, change the speed limit. Well, was this effective? I don't want to put a trailer out on the road and sensors to determine, or send an intern out to do traffic study to see if it actually worked. Just use your probe data. You can do that.
Or after like I-285, 400 airplanes built, all the traffic patterns are different.
Yeah. And in that use case, this data can help with some of that. It's the other unique thing about trip analytics is that you can't really figure out with probe speed-based data is that what are the routes that traveling public or freight trucks are taking? Okay, I implemented a detour, or I have this work zone. Today's use case is going to be focused on a work zone. Well, where are people coming from and where are they going to before the work zone? You know, where do I need to put my trailer DMS signs for detours? Oh, they're coming from this zip code. All right, well, put up my DMS trailer here. Or, as expanding the number of lanes or opening up this particular corridor, Has it had an effect on overall performance measures on the other roads? All right, well, let's figure that out. And trip-based data is super useful for that. Now, what you're going to see are some examples of the integration of waypoint-based data to help support a number of different use cases. I'm going to pause this for a minute. This one was kind of cool. One of my colleagues is a graduate of West Point, and he goes to the Army-Navy game every year. And he wanted to know what the, he wanted to conduct some kind of last mile analysis into the stadium parking area and figure out what routes were the visitors or attendees of the game, what routes were they using to get into the stadium. So the stadium is the 2 polygon, and he drew basically another skinny polygon kind of around the stadium to capture all the potential routes or roads that could be taken in. And then I think he was actually doing some analysis for some of the organizers for the Army-Navy game. It's like, what are the primary routes that, you know, attendees are taking into the game? And it does that. It prioritizes, says this is, you know, the number 1 route, this is the number 2 route, these are the number of trips, these are the number of vehicles, this is the distribution of vehicles. There was 4 passenger vehicles, there were 2 box trucks, and there was 1 freight truck. So some of the analysis you can do with trip analytics is very, very cool. This next use case was kind of along Rob's scenario. Hey, we did a bridge widening, and I think this was a post. It was a new bridge. So they were analyzing, okay, now that the new bridge is open, what's the distribution of vehicles that are using this new bridge via this route versus, you know, just the old bridge? And so have we had a positive effect? And are the travel times down? You know, have we improved the reliability? So all sorts of cool things that folks are using trip-based data for. Now then, let's talk a little bit about what you have access to. Now, if you navigate to this URL at the bottom of the, open another tab and navigate to trips.ritis.org. And log in with your RITIS credentials. There is a link to the big fat green button that takes you to setting up a study area and query. But over here on the right, if you click the Georgia dataset link, it takes you to that page that was on that slide deck. And this gives you a kind of a summary of the data that's available for the state of Georgia. And the left-hand side, this gives you a summary by the number of crossings. So if you take the border of Georgia and every road that intersects the border of the state of Georgia, there's 677 of them. Anybody know that? Apparently there's 677 junctions of roads to your state border. So think about that, right? If the state of Georgia represents, you know, trips that you're interested in, there's you're interested in where trips are coming from and going to. So you have to know what those roads are and at what point they're coming in or going out of the state, right? So it's just a summary number, but you guys have a lot of data at your disposal. I think, honestly, the state of Georgia probably has more trip data than any other state agency. These light green shaded polygons represent kind of the extent, geographic extent, of all trips. Like, you might have, for any given day, there's, maybe 5,000 trips that roll through the state of Georgia. Well, they could be coming from and going to a whole number of different locations. In a given day, though, this is the extent of where you're going to capture trips. Standard geographies. We'll get into a lot of this stuff in terms of what sort of filtering capabilities are available to you. So that's kind of a summary of the data that's available to you. Many, many years worth of data so that you could do comparative analysis from one year to the previous. So like in Rob's use case, hey, we had this, we opened up a new corridor. What did the route or trips look like before that corridor opened? What do the routes and trips look like now that the corridor, or this new corridor is open? All right, I'm going to pause for a minute. Any questions? Yes, sir.
What kind of new data are you discovering that you could fold in just based on the introduction of new technology? New kinds of data?
So the question was, what sort of new types of data that companies like INRIX can integrate into their sources to help enhance or enrich what's available to you guys for analysis. For waypoint-based data, which is what we're talking about this morning, no new sources other than partnering with more OEMs. So this kind of data, again, trip waypoint-based data relies on a frequency interval of 3 to 15 seconds, which is typically only available from onboard GPS devices from vehicles. Now, this afternoon, we'll be talking about probe speed data, and that's different, and there are kind of more additional sources coming online. We talked about mobile app-based, kind of location-based services that are available. There's also a lot of AI. Like this afternoon, we'll talk about AI and how AI is getting kind of snapped on to CCTV networks all over a state. And that just the software is able to take a look at the lens of a camera and do all sorts of kind of analysis, like vehicle counts, vehicle speeds, lane insights. So your typical speed and volume sensors that are kind of running down and need maintenance or replacement, that stuff's going out the door. State agencies like yourselves can completely rely on your existing CCTV feeds or other kind of fixed video cameras, still or live action, and do a number of annotations and calculations of what's happening on the roadway. It's tremendous technology. But yeah, follow-up question. Stephen, was it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you had to choose where you have gaps in data and wanted a new type of data, what would it be?
That. video AI. And it's come a long way in the last year. And we could talk about that offline. I can share some technology providers that do some of that. It's pretty remarkable. Yeah.
What is the difference between trip-based data and probe data?
Yeah, I tried to cover that at a high level with that one slide. The biggest difference between this morning's data and this afternoon's data, this morning's data is waypoint-based trip data. This afternoon, we'll be talking about probe speed data. Waypoint-based trip data is real observed trips. Like, there's a vehicle that went from point A to point B. It dropped thousands of coordinate values along the way. And we've taken those coordinates and conflated them to the road segments that they crossed. And then you get that back with this tool. You can query that road segment. You can't get the underlying waypoint data, but you can get the line segments, the routes, the trips that were taken as a result of those breadcrumbs that were dropped. The biggest key, it's observed. It's not modeled. It's not averaged. What you're working with this morning, is observed data. So these vehicles, while it's not a lot, it's still a couple 100 million every day that INRIX is collecting. To my point earlier, it's still statistically significant, right? It's a good question. Ask me again, I'll tell you the same thing. Observed, observed, observed. Matt.
Right. Just want to make sure that those terms are not being confused.
Yeah. So to repeat what Matt just said, quick summary, is that for this type of data, this waypoint, origin, destination, trip data, ran some calculations last year, and the vehicle miles traveled from this data set was representative of anywhere from 15 to 20% of all vehicle miles traveled within the state of Georgia. Imagine trying to put a tube counter on 1 in 5 roads all over the state. Not happening. Holy smokes, the insights you just gained from 15 to 20% of vehicle miles traveled within the state. That's this data set. Unbelievable. And that, to get to Stephen's question earlier, that level of vehicle miles traveled only increases as relationships with OEMs increases over time. So it's very cool. All right, yes, Rob.
Is it safe to assume that your degree of confidence goes down and you get more rural, more isolated, or not?
Not with waypoint data. So the question was, does the level of confidence for the data go down as you move away from an urban area, implying that in urban areas, there's older cars that may not have GPS devices on them, and in urban areas, you might have more current model cars that have GPS on them. You might be able to draw that. You might be able to draw that conclusion with probe speed data, young lady, this afternoon. But this is, again, this is observed data. These are observed trips. It's 15 to 20% of all trips that were taken and miles traveled within the state last year. Before we get to a quick stretch break, I'm going to walk through some of the query kind of setup functions for trip analytics, because it's going to kind of set the stage for our follow-along exercise. Within RITIS, this broad platform of tools and capabilities that I talked about earlier, that architectural diagram. Within RITIS, whenever you're using some of our tools to query this big data whether it's waypoint data or probe speed data, you're always going to need to work with the spatial parameters that you're interested in and temporal parameters. Because all of these trips occurred somewhere at some time, right? In the past, somewhere and some time. The tools let you ask those questions. You define the where and the when, the spatial and the temporal, for the trips, in this case, for the trips that you want to take. So let's walk through some of those spatial, some of the filtering and query capabilities of trip analytics. All trips that are captured for the state of Georgia, they're not just within the state. You know, it's any trip in the last, X number of years that happened within the state or across those 677 points at which roads come in or go out of the state of Georgia, right? So you have this broad net of trips, but you also have the ability to kind of filter out those trips spatially and create all sorts of really interesting scenarios using some of the spatial filters. I'll let you just glance at this for a little bit. By defining these spatial query or these geofences, setting up these geofences and these spatial filters, you can ask some really interesting use case questions. Like, hey, I'm in the city of Marietta. It's our use case today. I'm in the city of Marietta, and I want to know in the morning, what are the primary routes that people are taking to go through my city limit? You define it. You get, that geography in our exercise today is going to be the city limits of Marietta, but you could draw a polygon on the map. You could say, oh, I want these 8 zip codes, or oh, I want to look at this county. If you're ARC, you're just focused on the Atlanta region. Maybe you're just looking at a specific corridor. So you draw a polygon around a road. And then, oh, those are the trips that I want to understand where they're coming from. But then you can also define another set of polygons of where trips are going to analyze, from and to patterns. Here's an example where, in this case, we're doing very specific segment-based analysis. So the from is, I'll zoom in here. The southbound lane of I-85 and wanted to analyze, okay, well, what routes were taken, what trips were taken, and routes that were taken that passed through that particular polygon that was drawn on screen. And then you could do all sorts of kind of combinations, like, okay, it's, it passed through the from polygon and it had to exit, the to polygon. Sometimes you can make this polygon bigger if you wanted to, or upload your own polygon in geography and say, hey, it ended up in there. And going back to the city of Marietta scenario, maybe you want to know where trips began in the state of Georgia and around the state of Georgia that ended in Marietta. So you're considering commute patterns. Like, where are people coming from to commute into Marietta? I don't know. With this tool, you can answer that question. You can answer where they're coming from, what routes they're taking, what their travel time is, all of that stuff. So yeah, link analysis is one of those very specific functions that I think a lot of operations and planning folks like to use trip analytics for, because you could draw some very finite polygons on specific lanes. And think about it, if you got a bunch of waypoints, it's kind of hard to see that on the color. Is the colors of the base map coming out now that I zoomed in? Not really. It's kind of washed out. So that particular polygon is drawn around a northbound segment of I-95 and asking the question, hey, I want to know what trips pass through that particular segment. And you could do a couple of things, right? You can interactively create these geofenced spatial filters on the map, or you can upload your own geographies. So in the case of this morning's exercise, I think I went to the city of Marietta's GIS data portal. I downloaded their city limit. I connected to their city limits feature layer, and then I exported that as a shapefile, and then I just used trip analytics to upload the shapefile as my spatial filter for today's exercise. And it's super easy, right? You can use GeoJSON files, you can use, almost everybody uses shapefiles these days, but you can upload shapefiles to use as part of your spatial filter. You can upload two different shapefiles. Maybe one shapefile is your from geography, and another shapefile is your to geography. Or you have a collection of polygons that you can merge in ArcGIS Pro and use as your destination geography, or the destination pass-through geography. So we provide a lot of flexibility for you to create some super complex custom spatial filters, if you will. Any question about that? Yes, sir.
How long should a vehicle come to a complete stop to consider that it has ended its trip?
That's a great question. So the question was, how long does a vehicle need to be stopped in order for a trip to no longer be a trip? Generally speaking, it's 10 minutes. So if the vehicle has stopped and its position is static, coordinate position is static for 10 minutes or more, the trip ends. Now then, INRIX has some really cool business logic for freight trucks. They've got a huge volume of freight truck waypoint data, which is why you're able to pull out passenger vehicle, box trucks, and freight trucks from this data set. For their freight truck trip data, they have an algorithm in the back end that kind of takes into consideration, hey, if the vehicle stops in one of these geographies, like a truck stop, they have all of those polygons. If it stops in a truck stop or in a rest area and it sits for more than 10 minutes, that's fine. We're going to pick it up again. We're going to do the business logic to make it a chain. So for freight movement, they've got some business logic that addresses the.
Users have no control over the logic.
Pardon me?
The user has no control over the
Correct.
logic.
Yeah.
If you look at a gas station, you're not going to the convenience store to get your gas in. That's not a trip because people do not.
If a passenger vehicle stays in, I go to Buc-ee's, I'm charging my car, I'm in there for 45 minutes, man, just checking everything out. My trip ended. So yes, you go in a convenience store for more than 10 minutes as a passenger vehicle that gets picked up by INRIX, trip is done. Freight trucks, they've got some business logic that addresses the chaining of trips. Yes, Matt.
And I think to build on that, that is all very much dependent on the data set that you purchase, right? So what Rick just described as INRIX's business rules and business logic, on the marketplace that the Eastern Transportation Coalition has, AirSage exists. Now, Georgia does not subscribe to that, but they could and likely do have different business rules. GeoTab has different business rules. I think like and depending on who it has, like you could even, there is some functionality that exists, again, depending on the data provider and the application, like an Altitude, which we're not talking about today, which is GeoTab's platform. There is a threshold that you can say chain trips together if they stopped and started within, and then you define that. Now that's because they control the data from end to end. NRICS is different because they don't control the data from end to end. They pull it all in.
Yeah,
So
GeoTab's a good
making
example
sure
of,
that's clear.
of that, where it's nearly exclusively, to my knowledge, freight derived from freight telematic systems, and we integrate and work with GeoTab data with Trip Analytics platform. By the way, if you haven't picked that up, we're data agnostic. We're just an integration, archive, and analytics platform. RITIS is. So we do have some customers that have us bring in, integrate GeoTab data, archive it for them, and you'll see some examples of being able to query the GeoTab data here.
Does trip data recognize when the vehicle is turned off?
No. I'm sure INRIX knows, but not in the context of this data set. Yes. So there's complexity in a lot of this mobility-based data sources. And I think to Matt's point is that as a state, they've done a good, Georgia DOT has done a good job at identifying data sources that can support a number of different business use cases within the agency. Broadly speaking, much of what we're talking about this morning, this afternoon, can support planning activities, operations, and maintenance for the state of Georgia. All data is unique in terms of its source, how it's packaged up, how it is maybe delivered, how it's modeled, how it's averaged. This data is observed. It's not modeled. Some of the data that you have access to is modeled. Think about all of these data sources as a way to kind of complement and help validate, confirm some of your analysis or assumptions that you might be making. No one data source can support all your use cases. We like to believe in RITIS that RITIS is a comprehensive kind of archive and analytics suite that can help you answer a number of different business use case questions, but you do have a number of different data sources that can complement one another. And as complex as they are, think about them as complementing one another. Okay, let me just take a look at something real quick. I think it's a good point to take a stretch break. So can I ask you guys just come back at 10:30? So I don't know if we're on time, but yeah, just quick stretch, go get water. I don't know if there's coffee here. For getting back to your seats. Let's get going again. It is 10:31. Before I start again, are there any questions up to this point? Everything making sense? The pace okay? Thumbs up? Yeah, it's good. Okay. I appreciate the questions. You guys have been great for asking questions. Keep it up, because I think, if you're asking the question, there's probably someone else that's thinking it. And they're just reluctant to ask the question. That's usually how it works. But I appreciate the questions. I appreciate the interaction. Keep it up. So I shared with you some of the ways in which you can use trip analytics to set up the spatial parameters of your query. I'm not going to get into the temporal aspects because it's really straightforward. We'll get into it in the exercise in obviously more detail. But what I did want to share with you are what are the output data visualizations and reports that are generated from trip analytics. So whenever you set up the spatial and temporal parameter for any query within trip analytics, you're going to get 3 output reports. And they all mesh in terms of the summary metrics, in terms of number of trips. The 3 output reports and data visualizations are an OD matrix, a zone map, and a route map. A route map? What do you mean a route map? Remember, we're working with trip-based data. All those waypoints that are dropped by the 15 to 20% representative sample of vehicle miles traveled in the state of Georgia, all those waypoints are conflated to road segments. And those road segments, as you string them together from a trip perspective, where a trip began and where a trip ended, those are routes. Okay, that's one trip is a route. A trip began somewhere, ended somewhere. That trip is represented as a route. And when you perform a query, you're going to get all the routes and all the trips that correlated to your spatial and temporal query. Okay? And that matches, from a summary perspective, the zone map of O's and D's. Like, where did trips begin in orange? And where do the trips end in blue? So it's kind of, I'm not a planner, nor do I do any modeling like some of my product engineers that are responsible for this product, and they're kind of thinking about color schemes, and the output data visualization for a zone map is that, oh well, these orangish colors correspond to origin geographies, and way in here there's a blue polygon that represents the destination. D and blue, I don't know about that, but anyway, it's the way I remember O's and D's from a data visualization perspective. When you open the zone map, it's going to look like a mess. But I'll walk you through some of the best practices that I use to try to make sense of zone maps. One of them, to be honest with you, don't tell the product managers or the product developers this. Whenever I really want to dig into the output results from trip analytics and explore the O's and D's, I export it to a shapefile and I bring it into ArcGIS Online. Because, well, I didn't mention that. Before joining the CATT lab, I spent most of my first career was as a GIS practitioner. I worked for 20 years for Esri, 7 years in the GIS industry before joining Esri, and then I had a couple of years that I worked for Here Technologies between Esri and the CATT lab. So that's my connection to why you see a lot of GIS stuff and what I present is because I love it. You can take Rick out of GIS, but you can't take the GIS out of Rick. It's I really, really do enjoy it. So yeah, so there's 3 data visualizations or 3 output report data visualizations, and they all are linked or related to one another from a total count perspective. That OD matrix and the summary numbers that you get This is summarizing, this is a snapshot of, looks like block group IDs. Yeah, these are probably census block group IDs. These summary numbers from a from and to perspective, that's going to be the same values that when you sum everything up with those O and D geographies, it's going to be the same number. And when you count up all your trips, it's going to be the same number. So everything, it's just a different way of looking at the results. OD matrix, zone map, or route map. I did want to point out, and I kind of mentioned this, Matt was talking about geotab data. I mentioned this earlier, we are data agnostic. While we're working with INRIX data, and that's what GDOT is subscribing to, Trip Analytics is data agnostic. So we've done work to, you guys also have access to the NHTS, National Household Transportation Study, or is it traffic study? What's the T stand for? Travel study. Yeah. So the federal NHTS data, it's a geography-based OD data source. You have access to that in your data set. So when you log into Trip Analytics, and maybe you're interested in looking at some cool metrics like different modes or trip distances from a filter perspective, age groups, income, that NHTS data is much richer in terms of attribution, but it's much coarser in terms of OD. It's just O's and D's. It's just geography based. So when you log into Trip Analytics, you've got your Georgia data set that you have access to create a study. If you scroll down, you should see NHTS as a data source. Can anybody just kind of confirm that? And it shows up, just another big fat green button. So that's kind of cool. I want to make sure that you knew that you had access to that. But again, I don't want to get it.
More recent years, because I think the latest one is 2022.
That's a good question. I don't know. What year is that's available?
2020, 2021, and 2022.
So
So 2023.
2023 should be out?
2023 probably would be out, right? And 2024.
I will ask. So the question was, hey Rick, for the NHTS data, we've got up to 2022 available to us. Will the CATT Lab integrate and release 2023, 2024? If 2024 should be available from the feds, the question is whether or not we plan to integrate that. So thank you for that question. Talked about Geotab. Geotab's got some crazy, we talk about NHTS having some rich attribution. Geotab is wacky. I mean, look at these attributes. Agriculture, forest, Geotab is, again, mostly freight-based. Now, Matt, do you guys subscribe to any Geotab data? Have we integrated it into Trip Analytics for you? What's the front end app that you use to query it? Altitude. Okay. And that works pretty effectively? Altitude? So Geotab data is not trip-based. It's just, again, OD geographies. This INRIX waypoint trip data is pretty unique. In fact, to my knowledge, it's the only data source that allows you to query observed waypoint trip data and to query it and get those results, which is really phenomenal. Here's just a couple of use cases. Oh, I didn't play this. This was a freight movement out of the port in Mobile. Set up the query, kind of define the full study area, which is where all trips begin, or all trips that pass through any of these geographies. You zoom in. I set up some kind of custom geographies, like start in the Port Authority area, and I wanted to know, what route they took out of the port area during a specific day, just looking at heavy freight trucks. And where did they end up going? It's such a cool, when you run this analysis, this whole spider web, particularly out of ports, is really cool to look at. And then, like I said, I always take the output and I integrate it with ArcGIS. And it kind of, from my perspective, I think we're still, our product development folks are still working out how to classify zonal data and how to best classify the resulting route maps. And I'll get into this nuance later, but when you look at, these are destination geographies. I think they're zip codes. This is where all the trips, based on the temporal parameter that I set forth, out of Mobile Port, this is where all the destinations ended up going to. Do you notice any differentiation with the color of any of these zip code? No. But that's the default classification that we give you in trip analytics. And you can dork around with some of that with the legend, but we predefine using predefine this, I think it's a natural breaks. It's not quantile. I like to look at data from a quantile perspective. Like, all right, I know I have X number of polygons, and the trips within each of these polygons is different, and some of them are more significant. The destination is more significant than others. And so I want to see that visually. So it's just, just as I described, you can upload shapefiles to define the before, or to spatially define the from and to. When you finish generating your analysis, you can also export the results to GeoJSON file or a shapefile. We don't need to see, well, this one was kind of cool. I did this for Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. They were interested in knowing, the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority is an expressway that's privately owned, and it's a revenue generating, it's a for-profit entity. So they, public-private venture to build it. They turn it over to the private entity. They maintain and operate it, collect the tolls, and maintain that facility in the Tampa area. Well, they were curious to know of the users of their facility that ended up going to MacDill Air Force Base. This is the entrance to MacDill Air Force Base. So I drew a polygon to the one lane, drew a polygon around the one lane into, there's no other way to get to the Air Force Base, right? You can only go in one way, and that's through the security gate. So I drew a polygon around, you could see it there, drew a polygon around the incoming lane, and then I said, all right, well, where do trips come from that use the expressway Notice did you see where my from polygon was? So that was the expressway right here. This is the only way to get off the expressway to the Air Force Base. So I just drew a little polygon, my from polygon around that. And then my study area was, I just kind of digitized a big polygon around the Tampa region and said, hey, where are my trips coming from? Who's using the expressway? What zip codes? And then think about it from a business perspective. If you know who's using your expressway, or if you know who's using your expressway from a zip code perspective, but not using your expressway or your facility that could be a customer, this is a great marketing analysis. I thought it was a super cool marketing analysis that kind of reflected, all right, I know I'm getting good penetration and usage from these zip codes that are darker orange color, but hey, some of these other zip codes, they've got bigger populations. They could be candidate, broader candidate usage of the facility. So maybe we could do some targeted campaign marketing in those zip codes. This is kind of a different way of thinking about how to use trip-based data. From an ops perspective, ops and maintenance, take that scenario and create a work zone. Make it a work zone, right? If you have an ongoing work zone that has, late night hours and you want to communicate lane closures and when those lane closures are going to happen during the work zone or during the active period of the work zone, that's where are we going to, this is a new work zone. Where are we going to set up our trailer DMS? Oh, these are the routes that people are taking to go through that work zone. This is where we put our trailers, right? And then, there's all sorts of kind of ops maintenance related scenarios. This one's kind of cool. This is you guys are familiar with fires under bridges and and what happens there. This is a fire under the bridge in LA, kind of south of downtown. It was Interstate 10 that this, I forget what caught fire here, but demanded that they closed down Interstate 10 for a while. I ran some, actually, I don't know if, my colleague Greg Jordan ran this analysis. So he ran some analysis to determine, one, to ask the question, all right, I know the typical route that people use to go from east to west on I-10. So this is the typical westbound traffic. Before the fire, most of the trips took Interstate 10. Notice this. Can you see that green line? That green line is what's called a screen line. We're gonna play around with this in the exercise. Hopefully we have some time. I'll be able to demo it interactively. But the screen line allows you to, after your analysis has been conducted, you're viewing your route map, that route map output data visualization. You could digitize a screen line across the trips that were taken or the routes that were taken from one direction to another. See the little arrows here? And it will count the distribution of what percent took Interstate 10 and what percent took 101. That was the typical flow. Run the same analysis after the fire. Let's see what we get. And I'm just highlighting some of the metrics that you get. Travel time, 12 minutes. Typical eastbound. Okay, come on, move on. post-fire detours, eastbound. Did I get to westbound? Yeah, here we go. Oh my God. Look at, so I'm going to try to pause this. Here we are, westbound. Look at all of the different routes that people were taking to get around the I-10 closure. And you're able to quantify it by percentage. Travel times were a damn mess across the board. Everyone, a majority of the trips, 83% were taking 101 around Interstate 10. Yeah, you had a 400% increase in travel time to go from the same area around entering Interstate 10 to getting out of the same area. Well, I don't know if you noticed, but if you've ever run some analysis with trip analytics, this route map output data visualization looks like a bowl of spaghetti. Like, I can't make sense of that. Like, all right, I could draw a screen line and maybe determine, the propensity of, what route was taken to get from that polygon to that polygon. But I have to really kind of dig into it and explore. Screw that. I just export it. I export the results of my route map right there. And then I brought it into ArcGIS Online. And one of the attributes that gets carried out with that export, every single road segment that a trip crosses, it gets a count of the number of trips. So you're getting basically a network of roads when you export your shapefile, but on that network of roads, you've got a couple of options. One of them is the total number of trips that used that particular road segment. So then you could symbolize, you could classify all those road segments by some quantitative value. And you could more clearly see, oh yeah, wow, most of the trips did take 101 to go from here to there. But you know what? Another big alternative was this route and this route. And then be able to kind of do some cool, generate some cool pop-ups. Hey, there were 3 trips that took, Freeway 101. And you can include travel time and blah, blah, blah. All sorts of different cool use cases for operations and planning. And with that, I'm going to pause and we are going to jump in to an exercise. All right, any questions? Going to recap really quickly. Type of data that we're working with. Observed waypoint trip routes from ITRIX. It's the distinguishing factor to these trips. They're observed. It's real. It's not modeled. It's not averaged. That's the source data. We archive it for you so that you can use Trip Analytics, the tool, to query spatial and temporal parameters you define and configure the spatial and temporal parameters to answer questions like, some of those use cases that I shared with you. Now, our exercise, if you opened that URL, I'm going to close this, keep that open. How are we looking from, wow, and there's a lot of people in here. Now remember this, this website, this training website that you landed on, we're kind of focused on, this morning we're working on Trip Analytics. When you go back to the office, you've got your slide deck. the full videos, MP4, the videos, go ahead and click this link here, the follow along exercise, to open that up. And that's PDF of our exercise. So I'm going to zoom in here. I don't know what drew me to Barrett Parkway other than, hey, we're doing training in Marietta. I did a quick review of work zones that were located in and around the city of Marietta, and I saw that Barrett Parkway was an active work zone. You're nodding your head, you're laughing, you're snickering over there. What's up with Barrett Parkway, my friend?
We're Cobb County, so.
Okay. So you know this one well. Okay, cool. We're not diving into at all any of the real-time situational awareness capabilities of RITIS. If I could say, if I could put an analogy to what we're covering today, that whole idea of dipping your toe into the water, we're probably dipping a couple of toes into the water with regard to the capabilities that are available to you and the tools that are available to you within RITIS. Is that a fair characterization, Matt? I mean, trip analytics and probe data analytics and what we'll cover is just below the surface. There's a whole rich set of real-time situational awareness tools. How many of you are on the ops and maintenance side, or on the maintenance side of GDOT, or support maintenance operations with GDOT? Not maintenance at all? You're just familiar with the work zone? Okay. If you were to log into, just because we're talking about this work zone on Barrett Parkway, if you're to log into RITIS, this is the landing page for RITIS. One of the many tools that are at your disposal on the far right is this guy, the WZPMA, Work Zone Performance Management App. If you click that, it is going to open a dashboard of, it's going to open a dashboard of every work zone within the country that we are integrating and archiving within RITIS. It is organized by state and by county. So if you're on the ops or maintenance side, you want to take a look at one of your work zones and get some details about how they're performing. If you click any one of these work zones, notice that they're basically a hyperlink. It opens up a work zone profile. So this is the Barrett Parkway profile, work zone profile. In here, it gives you some details about what's the speed in the work zone. This is a northbound. It's actually Barrett Parkway is kind of oriented northwest southeast. So it's the northwest or northeast bound lane is where the work zone is. These colors provide insights to the speed in and around the work zone. You've got DMS signage that's near the work zone, bottleneck insights, user delay costs. This is real-time speed for the work zone over the course of the last 12 hours and over the last several days. But this, I opened this up just to give me a sense for where it was, how it's performing. But in context to trip analytics, I really wanted to understand, all right, so Barrett Parkway is,
Well, we only have 3 tabs. The end of personal traffic alerts, we don't have work zones. Or I don't. Go back to
who does not have WZPMA?
Our stop after COVID-19 impact.
Really?
I would encourage you, that's weird.
Yep. So I'll repeat what Matt just said. For those of you who raised your hand and indicated you do not have that link to WCPMA, send an email to support@ritis.org. Let them know, hey, if you're not a GDOT employee, make sure you let them know. They'll see your association with GDOT within our support system, but say, hey, I do not have work zone management app active in RITIS. Could you please activate? It's as simple as that. Yeah.
Could you also do just on the bottom of that webpage has contact us or just general?
Better to use support@RITIS because contact us is another group. This is our tech support. So we do have we've got a pretty solid team of tech support analysts. I want to say there's maybe 7 or 8. And everything I've seen and observed or heard from customers is that you send us an email, you send tech support an email, they're going to be super responsive just to let you know, hey, we got your email, thanks for pinging us, and we're going to look into it immediately. And there's a group of people, they're assigned different roles and responsibilities, but they'll address the issue. But yeah, that's kind of wacky that you don't have that active as you should. If you find any other anomalies like that within the RITIS platform, again, send an email to support@ritis.org. Okay? We're not going to talk about any of this super cool real-time situational awareness capabilities that are in RITIS. Maybe Mary, Matt, we can do another session another time. I could spend all day talking about the real-time stuff. There's like dashboard tools, there's all of this. I couldn't spend all day, but I could spend a couple of hours just focusing on all of the cool stuff that's available to you within RITIS Traffic Map. But I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to distract. All right. Were you everybody able to successfully open the PDF follow-along exercise, Trip Analytics? Anybody not able to open that? All right. I prepared this PDF so that you can do this back at your desk. It's a general guide for the steps necessary to generate the results that we're going to take a look at as part of our exercise this morning. We've got about just under an hour left. What I want to do, I don't want to follow this exercise explicitly. I want to kind of walk through a demo with you that correlates to the exercise. All right, you have the document. You can take this back to your office. You can replicate it yourself. But what we're gonna do, going back to Barrett Parkway as an area of interest, what I wanted to do is understand and analyze what are the trips that are being taken through this segment of Barrett Parkway. But more broadly, because I wanted to show you how to use some of these uploading of shapefile geographies, I blew it out and I said, you know what, screw it. I'm not going to just focus on Barrett Parkway. Barrett Parkway it's either in Marietta or just outside. I never did, just outside the city limit. I said, you know what, screw it. I want to demonstrate some of the capabilities of uploading custom shapefiles, and I want to analyze travel patterns and trips through the city of Marietta. Okay? So my thinking originally was all about the work zone, and you can use that as a focus for your study later, but I kind of zoomed out a little bit from a study, a geographic study perspective, to just focus on the city of Marietta. And I think I captured that in the exercise. What I'm going to do, though, is just kind of point out a couple of things. In here, you can, this is that link. That's a link to the actual shapefile, a zipped shapefile that you can use to upload into Trip Analytics. Give you some product. See this link here, view results? Go ahead and click that. I'm curious if that, see how long this takes to open up for some of you guys. That should be, if you've logged into Trip Analytics or RITIS, that will open up my analysis that we're going to walk through. So this negates the need for you to hit the submit button. Do not submit a query, please. It's why I pre-ran the analysis. So it looks like it's coming up. Good, good, good. So if you don't have RITIS credentials, look over your neighbor's shoulder. I see this young man here. He's able to open my report. All right. So let's talk about how to set up a query or set up this query of understanding trip patterns through the city of Marietta. All right. When I log in to Trip Analytics, I'm a super user, so I have access to a lot of state data. I mean, there's a lot of states using this type of trip waypoint-based data. I went ahead and clicked Georgia. That's a big fat button. One of the first things you want to do in setting up your query is to create a study, like a study area. Now you could look at your existing studies. I've got a whole bunch here. Each study has, you have the ability to, once you set up your study area, which I'll show you how to do, you have different queries that you can run within the context of that study area, like different time periods, different from and to, spatial filters, right? It's kind of cool, right? You set up the study area once, and then the idea of being able to do, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of iterative time-based queries against the data, it's organized really well for you to be able to do that. So I ran, in this example, I ran 2 studies. I ran 2 queries, one for the AM peak through the city of Marietta and one for the PM peak. And I just made up the AM and PM. But this gives you a sense for, hey, you know what? I want to analyze just a specific temporal period for these special geofence spatial filters that I set up, or maybe different dates. Like, oh, I want to analyze, instead of just analyzing the last week of June, maybe I want to analyze, and I want to compare that to the last week of May as compared to the last week of April and the last. So once you set up your study area, let's get back to this. Once you set up your study area, you could go back and add different queries. So let's create a new study. So we're going to start from the very beginning. When you hit the create study, it's going to ask you a series of questions to kind of frame what it is geographically, frame the study area that you want to run your analysis on. You've got 3 options. Remember early on I told you the extent of all trips that may have gone through the state. You've got, you clear out to Maine and out to the west to Nebraska and all the way into Texas, right? Unbounded, no bounds. You can get for your spatial and temporal analysis, you can include all of those. Or you could be very specific. Oh, I only want to consider trips that occurred in and out of the state of Georgia, only those. Or you could use a custom geography. You say, all right, well, you can upload a custom geography. Remember, we can use a custom shape file to define the study area. Or we can use states to define our study. Oh, you know what? I want to look at Georgia, and I want to include Alabama and North Carolina, South, every state that's adjacent to the state of Georgia, or maybe I want to use counties. Oh, and you know what? Because I'm in Cobb County, which is right here, right there, and I want, you know, I want to consider all the adjacent counties to Cobb. How do I deselect? Okay, I deselected. So lots of different options, standardized geographies, or you could say, you know what? I just want to draw a silly random polygon on screen, and that's going to be my study area. This option here, specify internal zones for origins and destinations. So when, yes ma'am?
Does it run faster if you generate a smaller area?
So the question was, does the analysis and does your query run faster if the scope or the extent of the trips you consider for your analysis is smaller? Of course, because you're not including millions of trips. You're just including those within a specified smaller geography. So great question. That also applies to the temporal aspects of your query, which we'll get into in a minute. The smaller the temporal window, the faster that query is going to return some results. Yes, sir?
Is there a restriction on how small of a geofence you put as a center?
For setting up your study area, you want it to be represented. You got to think about what's the question you're asking? What's a use case? And for establishing your study area, you generally want it to be fairly inclusive of a broad area. You know, if it's work zone related, you know, you want your study area, if you're thinking about communicating work zone closures, you want to understand where people are coming from, and two, with regard to where that work zone is.
If I got into like private data or something, if maybe you're like in a more of a rural area or like a residential area, and you're like, well, there's only 3 houses out in this area
Yeah.
that it could possibly be, or trying to do this.
So his question is more about privacy. So trip-based data, as you'll see, the results, when you look at the route map, there's going to be a beginning point to the trip and an end point to the trip. INRIX, as part of their secret sauce in correlating those waypoints to actual road segments to create an actual trip or route, they do what's called obfuscating. They obfuscate the origin and destination by, I think it's a 1/4 mile. So they eliminate all of the waypoints that are within a 1/4 mile of the beginning of a trip and all the waypoints around a 1/4 mile to the end of a trip. So you really have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, it might show up in a neighborhood but there could be dozens of homes that started in that neighborhood, or
There's outliers and everything.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's a good question. But for setting up your study area, you want it to be inclusive of all the possible trips that you want to analyze, because again, it's just that bucket that you're what's that catchment basin of trips that you want to analyze spatially and temporally. But then this part is, how do you remember the OD matrix and the zone maps that we have? They summarize trips by geography. Well, you can define that summary level geography at this point. You could say, oh, yeah, I want to summarize my counts in that OD matrix from a zip code perspective. And that's what I used. Or, oh, no, I want to summarize by sub-county. And, oh, maybe I want to upload my own geographies. I think we have TAS, Transportation Analysis Zones, in here. Yeah. But maybe you have your own unique series of geographies that, from a planning perspective, maybe you've got MPO unique borders and you want to summarize by MPO geography. All right, upload those geographies here. You can do that. Now, for our analysis, I use zip codes as my summary method. Click Next. External zones, they're only used when the analysis goes beyond the OD gates. Typically not used. So, but if you wanted to summarize by external zones, you can do that. And then last, to set up your study area, the last thing you want to do, just give it a name. This is my test, or this is my city of Marietta, whatever you want to call it. It's relative to the study. Now then, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go back into my studies and show you, once you've set up your study. This is my Georgia DOT Summer 2005 training. This is my study. If I were to, I could go in and edit that. Like, I could change the scope, geographic extent of my study. I could clone it. I could delete it. I can add some notes. But within my study area and that catchment basin that I've set up, I've got different queries. And I've already run these. I've set them up. You've already opened one of them. And I think my link is to the PM peak analysis. Can you tell? When you open my analysis, in the upper left-hand corner, if you click on that, anywhere in that black area, it's gonna bring up some details to the query, which we're still going to get into. It's the 7 a.m. to 9 a.m., right? The AM peak? Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. So let's look at what I did to set up my query. I'm going to just go ahead and open my query. And we're going to walk through the spatial and temporal parameters that I used to set up my query. The first thing I wanted to do is, because I want to analyze trips that went through the city of Marietta, because I didn't want to get it, I wanted to demonstrate using custom geographies, and a custom geography that is not in our list of predefined geographies is the city of Marietta's city limits. But I wanted to be inclusive of where trips could have potentially originated. And so I went out, as I demonstrated, and I clicked all the states around Georgia. I forgot to include Florida. Now, I could edit this if I wanted to and include Georgia and rerun it, but it's very, very simple. You just come in here and you say, all right, well, I've already defined my study area. I've named it. Now these are my filters that we're working on here. Yeah, it's not going to come up. Not going to let me jump into that the way I wanted to. I'm just going to have to keep going. And show you what I did. So I'm going back to setting up my study because I want to walk you through setting up the spatial and temporal parameters. So that's my study area. Now then, once you've established your study area, your query is specific to that geographic extent that you've set up. This is where you get into defining the kind of the from geography and the to geography and the temporal parameters. So it's going to ask you some questions. I'm setting my filters. Well, the first thing you want to do you want to analyze the routes and the trip paths? Going back to this lady's question about, hey, Rick, if you set your study area up to be smaller in geographic extent, will your query run quicker? Yes, it will. Your query will run even quicker if you're not analyzing trip paths. So you can just do kind of OD, geography-based analysis, by clicking that option. So that's the difference there.
And the duration too, right?
Pardon me?
Like the time?
The time period's just going to add, so the broader the temporal extent, the longer it's going to take to query. But this is another, analyzing the pathways is, because it's a bunch of trips and routes, it's just going to take longer to query all of those. Yeah. So the question was, hey Rick, if I set up my spatial and temporal parameters, hit the submit button, and I close the tab and walk away, will it run faster? I don't know if that's the case. It will run because this is a solution as a service, kind of an IT term. All this stuff is running in the cloud in the background. As soon as you hit submit, there's nothing going on your client end in your browser. You hit submit, it's going to our servers, and that query is running on our servers. And you come back in X amount of time, and you're going to see your results. It'll either be spinning here, or it'll be done. Okay. Oh yeah. It will be in my studies. Yeah. Yeah, as soon as you hit submit, boop, it's running on our servers. Yep. And there's plenty of people that do that. UJ in particular. We were talking about a colleague over at ARC who's done some really remarkable work with probe data analytics. I'll share some of that with you guys this afternoon, whoever's going to stick around this afternoon. But a good example of clicking go and letting it run overnight. All right, so we're setting up our spatial filters. First thing you got to do is determine whether you want to use trip paths or not. Then you get into setting up the spatial filters, the from and the to. And again, lots of different options in terms of what sort of predefined geographies that you want to use from a from perspective. Remember, I did this whole, oh yeah, I want to, if a trip started in any of these states, you can click through those, or I think I can drag. Can I drag? Yeah. Did you see? If you hit, I'm going to go back. Let's say you want to summarize by zip code, or you want to, if you want your O's to be zip codes. Like, they started outside this study area. Or no. Is that my study? Yeah. You want to consider O's that were outside this study area. If you hit the Shift key and the left mouse button, you could drag a box, and it'll select all the zip codes within that area that you selected. Now then, my study area is just inside that random polygon that I drew. By doing this, what's going to happen, you see all of those little dots along my study area? Those dots represent entry points into roads that intersect my random polygon. And what will happen, it's going to create a summary for every single one of those entry points. Because the trips are coming from outside my study area, it will at least summarize by those entry points. All right, so let's just say we're going to, those are our origin geographies. Then we come into the specifics of how we want to consider the trips that go through those origins. We could say, hey, I want to consider all the trips that started inside those geographies and either ended inside or ended outside. Or maybe just ended outside. I mean, there's all sorts of different combos here. For our scenario, I'm going to go back. Because I'm dealing with states, I said, you know what? I want to consider all trips that may have originated from anywhere within the state of Georgia or adjacent to the state of Georgia or states adjacent to the state of Georgia. And that is, that's going to be my O. So they started inside and maybe ended outside. But then I want to add a second filter. My second filter is going to be passing through not a predefined geography, but a custom geography. So you click the upload area. Now this is where I just choose a file. So I go to wherever I downloaded that zipped shape file. Here it is, city limits. And it uploaded just like that, uploaded that shapefile. That's now my to geography. So I'm considering, all right, trips that may have originated within Marietta. You know, I could do a reverse, like, okay, this is my, I need this to be my to. See that? I could switch it from and to. So maybe they started inside and ended up within the state of Georgia or elsewhere. So there's some cool things you could do there, or just pass through. You know, I really wanted to know, you know, kind of along the line of a work zone analysis, you know, that Barrett Parkway work zone is right in here, I believe, like right through here. Is that correct?
It's called like the Bear Reliever. That road that your mouse is almost on right there going down is where it's going to go over, like go down and then into the
No kidding.
And so we're trying to like reroute traffic away from going down Barrett Parkway and give them an additional way to kind of get around some of that mall area traffic.
It is kind of a mess over here. I happen to be over here. Yeah. So it's super cool. But I guess by illustrating how I could upload this custom geography, I could have just as easily, like if I'm on the maintenance side and I really wanted to figure out, where trips are coming from, I draw a polygon around the portion of Barrett Parkway that I'm interested in analyzing. Or maybe I can drill in, kind of go back to that earlier question about how small of a polygon can I use, Rick? Maybe I want to use that work zone. My from geographies are all these states, and I really do want to analyze. Lose track of myself here. I really do want to analyze. Did I go too far? Right here. So let's say I want to do direction-specific link analysis. And I want to understand who's coming from all of those states and are getting off and going southwest bound on Barrett Parkway. Or actually, I need to make that the 2 and passing through. You see how I did that? Just draw a polygon. If you want to be lane specific, link analysis specific, draw your polygon around a single lane, or draw a polygon around, a junction like I did for that military, that Air Force base over in Tampa. Mary.
So if you've got something that
your polygon away from it. Okay? So keep in mind, if you did draw your polygon over northbound I-75 along with Barrett Parkway, it's in the same Z-space. So it's going to pick up trips that passed through Barrett Parkway and trips that passed through I-75 northbound. So that's a really good question. We give you the ability to add a second polygon, but you don't need to. Like if you, let's just say for instance,
Sorry to interrupt you, but it doesn't work if you don't hit the next button. So it doesn't go to the next filter. So I need to do something here to get the green next, and then hit the button, and then go.
So the point is that you have to establish completely the spatial filters in order to move on to the temporal filters. There's some checkpoints in there for you to do that. If you want to summarize trips by just a county, let's use Marietta city limits as the example. It could just as easily be the county of nope.
Because if you use the study area as the spatial filter, that's your regional study area.
Yeah,
right?
you don't want to do that. What did I do here? So that's when setting. So you want to look at Marietta in particular?
So let's say we want to do a predefined area that we define on the last slide.
Okay.
So we see the enter points and we have this predefined area. And we just want to see the OD trips within that area.
If you want to see the OD trips within a predefined area from a predefined study area,
Yes, like you drew a polygon and you define the area. Yeah.
you'd have to create that predefined area as a shapefile or GeoJSON file to summarize by that geography.
Yeah, but I don't need to do it.
All right. Reestablish my query here. These are my froms. All right, going back to the exercise. These are my from geographies. My to geography, again, was a custom geography. It's the city of Marietta. Again, just an effort to demonstrate. Once you've set up this spatial filter geofence, you can define, all right, well, I want to summarize, I want to determine what trips ended inside or passed through, and the trips that they and the routes that they took. In our exercise, the filters, I want to reemphasize that the shorter time period that you're analyzing, the quicker your analysis is going to run. So, like, if you can, start by looking at just days. Like, you can look at specific time windows that you're really narrowing it down, but I think generally speaking, there's some rule of thumb that if you pick up a couple hundred trips in your analysis, that's a statistically significant count for your analysis. You know, in our analysis, we've got thousands of trips, but keep in mind, you've got lots of flexibility here in determining the date ranges, you know, dates, months. But the broader the temporal scope, the longer it is that query is going to take to run. So just be cautious of that.
Sorry, before we go into the temporal aspect of this, just one question on the space. You have three geographies, the steady area, from, and to. And the only geography that comes with OD gates is the steady area.
Correct.
So if I'm concerned about my OD gates, I should define my steady area based on what OD gates I want.
Well, so the question was, the only place that you're going to get OD gate summaries is at the intersection of a road and your study area. All right? So if that's your interest, is OD gate analysis, you have to be mindful about defining your study area. So you either upload a geography, a custom geography that's specific to your use case, or you use the predefined geographies through the drop-down list.
Okay, just as an example, let's say there's a mall, and I want to know how many people are coming to this mall from I-75 South, North, 575 South, North, and one other area, one other road. So I'm going to define a study area so that I'm capturing gates on all these entry points or access points, and that's going to be my study area, and then from and to will be gone.
And so the scenario of a mall and capturing the trip counts at the gates, you're still going to want the study area to be fairly large around the mall, but then your spatial filter is going to be specific to the mall itself.
Right.
Then that way when you go to summarize, the OD gates themselves, those intersection points around your study area, between the road and the study area itself, it's just a way for us to help summarize with an OD matrix and the zone map, those actual trip counts, because it's got to be equal. And that's why you're going to get those OD gates. But that is possible. Is that the question?
Yeah,
Or
I'm trying to understand how to define a study area because I'm interested in OD analysis, where people are coming from going out of this mall.
so in that scenario, if you've got kind of a smaller study area, you'll get a sense you'll get a good summary of where people are entering the study area and summarizing that. But I would argue that a broader kind of study area would give you some insights as to like zip code locations that they're coming from. So when you, like in this example, I could restrict my analysis to this random polygon, but when I go to open the OD matrix or the route map, it's only going to be routes within that study area, and then it's going to summarize trips at these particular gates. I may want to look at I may want to look at all the trips outside that study area. So you got to think through what it is. What's the question you want to answer? If you want to, if it's from a mall, if you're analyzing mall origins and destinations, where are they coming from? Broaden that study area up, right? So that you can determine specifically what geographies if you don't broaden the scope, you're only going to get trip counts at the gate. You're not going to know what geography they came from. You're just going to get trip counts at the gate.
And that's all I want.
So I think and I'm trying to figure out myself. So the gray dots, that was your study area. So when you do like the shift and the drag with your left mouse, you got to stay inside that or outside it, or
It doesn't matter.
but your data won't-
It'll-
that's what I'm trying to visualize what I want to ask.
Yeah, because the study area is this random geography, what it will do is it'll not only give you some results inside the study area, but to this example, it's also going to summarize the number of trips that pass through that road at that particular location for you, so that everything is equal. Just because you define your study area to be that unique geography doesn't mean that there's no trips that occurred outside of that study area. Of course there are trips that came in from that outside that study area. What we have to do is we have to balance the spreadsheet. In order to balance the spreadsheet, we're creating these OD gates, and we're saying, okay, whatever you don't get trip count values for inside your study area, we're going to wrap them up and summarize it for all of those OD gates.
So you're going to always choose draw area?
No. Maybe you want to use a predefined geography.
I would say like one county to another county.
Yeah, you can do that. There's so many different scenarios. It's kind of crazy. Matt has a comment.
I would say, I think probably to help people understand it, it might be helpful to get to the end.
Yeah.
And then back up, right? Because there's the way that you're looking at this and the way it's explaining, I think those dots, not these dots.
Yeah, the challenge. Yeah. So your exercise, the follow along exercise, walks you through answering a question about what routes were taken, to what roads were predominantly taken that passed through the city of Marietta, and where did they come from a zip code perspective. It's one use case, and this is the answer. The answer looks like this. Where we're getting caught up, I think it's important, where I think we're all getting caught up, and to Matt's point, is that there are lots of different use cases. But the tools with the spatial filtering options and temporal filtering options that are available to you allow you to answer a broad range of use case questions as a traffic operations specialist, a maintenance specialist. Now then, I perform this query ahead of time. All of you have opened it. Again, I defined, if I look at the results, this is giving me a summary of what my analysis was. My study area, I think I used unbounded. Actually, if a trip started, wherever a trip was captured, relative to the time period that I analyzed, it's not, I only analyze 7 to 9 a.m., so I'm not going to get trips outside of these 5 states or 6 states. But I chose to have an unbounded study area. My internal zones, how do I want to summarize from an OD matrix perspective and a zone map perspective? How do I want my trips summarized from a data visualization and count perspective? It's zip codes. All right. What else do I have here? Oh, you've got six origin geographies. It's those 6 states, and 1 custom area. That's the city of Marietta. Included in my query, a little summary. I was very specific. I wanted to analyze the last week of June, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday only, AM peak, and I chose to look at all vehicle types. Now you can get really specific. If you just want to look at passenger vehicles, it's only going to look at passenger vehicles. The results are this. Let's go through this really quickly. I know we only have a few more minutes before lunch. In the top, you get a total count of trips with the number of routes that were taken. So there was some routes that were taken more than once, and we could see that in this particular column. Number of trips for this particular route, 12 times. In the upper right-hand corner, you've got display options. If you don't want to look at, say for instance, you wanted to look at all the routes that were taken, turn all those on. You don't need to look at all of those, but maybe you just want to look at all the routes that had 2 or more trips. You could come in here, or 5 or more trips. You could kind of customize that, apply your filter, and what that does is that automatically turns on all the routes that, all the trip routes that had 5 or more number of trips. Trip routes that have 5 or more trips. And you kind of explore those. You can interact with them. You can see them click or hover over and get some details. And that highlights all of those in that tabular list up above. If you wanted to filter further by hours that the trip took, or travel time, so on and so forth, lots of options to play around with that stuff. And then remember, we talked about all of this stuff being equal. Right? The route map data visualization has the same trip counts as a zone map and the same trip counts as an OD matrix. Every single one of these data visualizations allows you to open its comparable report as either an OD matrix or a zone map. So all you have to do is just click in the upper right-hand corner, in this case, just click the Open As, say, oh, I want to look at the OD matrix. And it's going to prepare the OD matrix for you. And it's going to be all the zip codes from the O's and all the zip codes of the D's. And it's going to summarize all those trips. If I wanted to look at the zone map, just click Open Zone Map. And again, oh God, it keeps logging out on me. That's going to take a while. I do want this to come up though. That's the OD matrix.
Can I just call you when I want to do a search for a project? Walk me through it.
Yeah, tech support won't do that for you, but I'm happy to help. Retrieving zones. Okay, we're getting close. So this is generating the OD. Something else I wanted to share with you. If you wanted to share with a colleague of yours or a consultant wanted to share with a GDOT employee the results of your analysis, every report has a unique URL, and you know what type of data visualization it is because it'll have either zone map, matrix, or route map as part of the URL. So if we go back to the zone map that generated, this is what a zone map looks like. All the O's are in orange and D's. In some cases, because these are zip codes, there's O's and D's in both polygon, or there's origin and destination values in probably most of these zip code polygons. You can interact with these to get a sense for what the origins and destinations were. You can play around with the legend. It's prefixed the number of classes. So if you just really wanted to focus on, like, how many were there here? 679. This one had 700. So from an origins perspective, you want to monkey around with the legend just to can hide the lowest value. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, it's part of the exercise. Hey, what were I forget the questions that I asked, this conversation about, okay, well, from an OD perspective, what's the top, what was the questions? What percentage of trips use the I-75 expressway. That's the one I wanted to. And then other than interstates, what major arterial? Oh, that was a different question. Yeah, so with the route map, what I did was I said, hey, I'm going to unfilter those and turn on all my routes, which might take a little while. I'm going to show you how to, maybe just 2 or more trips, because that's a mess. So using the screen line, thinking about the city of Marietta, like what routes were generally taken through the city or into the city. In the upper left-hand corner of the map window is the screen line tool. If you click it once, it's going to activate it, and it's ready for you to start digitizing on screen your screen line. And so all I did was I basically just digitized my screen line across from a, thinking about traffic traveling through the city from the northwest. Notice I have these little arrows pointing into the city. And then I get these pop-ups that tell me what the percentage of trips that took specific routes. And then if I want to see some specifics to that breakdown, I can expand my screen line and go, 57% took I-75 through the city. And then the second largest number was this unlabeled, 14%. The express lanes, this is a cool way to define, how many trips are actually using the express lanes? You can do that with this sort of analysis. And then, interestingly, I guess Cobb Parkway, US 41, is a pretty significant corridor that's used coming into that part of Marietta. And then I could switch the direction, going out, going northbound out of the city for the same time period. And then really quickly, I know we're almost at noon. If I want to play around with this and another data visualization, all you have to do is click the export button. You can download GeoJSON. You download shapefile. Keep in mind, if you have multiple geographies selected, when you export your shapefile, it's going to create a zip of zipped shapefiles. So like right now, I've got the study area, the spatial filter, and maybe I want my routes as well. You can have one line per route, or I could have one line per segment, and then the segment gets the total count of trips that were taken on it. Right now, that's 3 different shapes. Each one of them is going to be zipped up into one big zip file. And then once you export that, then you can do cool stuff like this. Like this is my OD analysis that allows me to kind of look more broadly at, from a classification perspective, the different destinations. Most of the trips were focused in and around Marietta. And there's coincidence between the origin geographies and the destination geographies. So not long distance. But we also had some trips that passed through Marietta and ended up way up here, Tennessee. Not a surprise, because I included freight truck activity. But just to, this is just to illustrate the flexibility and taking the results of your analysis and looking at it in a different way from different data visualization. Here's that OD matrix. If I had, if the scope, geographic scope, had some gates on it, I'd see the gates in here, and it would summarize it up. But all my trips were within. I didn't bound my study, so the summary of trips is pretty clean because it's by zip code. And if I were to look at this number in the lower right-hand corner, 7,223 trips, that's going to be the same as my route map and the same as my zone map. If I were to add up all, if I were to add up everything, from a zonal perspective, it's going to add up to 7,223. That's that whole idea of there's a dynamic kind of count relationship between all these data visualizations, just so that everything's accounted for. Even if your study area cuts off trips outside of the study area, you'll get gates, you'll get OD gates at the edge of your study area that summarize accordingly. Yes, ma'am. Say that again.
The other column points to that external.
Yeah. If you were dealing with OD gates, it would be reflected in one of these kind of column summary aggregations. Right now, I summarize by zip code, internal and internally, that is. Does that make sense? Hey, Rob.
We did a project similar. Well, that graphic looks similar, and it was actually copy on it, but anyway, looking at an alternate route for some different roadway improvements. And so back to if I'm going to go back to the OD's map or the matrix. So basically replacing the zip codes with roadways names like Cobb Parkway or highway, whatever. And there were more than we needed. But can you eliminate unnecessary gates or small roads, whatever roads, from this and have it recalculate, or do you have to go back, hold on, redefine your study area?
If you wanted, so
That
Rob.
Nice way to flexible hopefully be a little like
So he ran some analysis. His OD matrix included some corridors that they didn't want included really in their summary. The OD gate, this tool is going to summarize everything at that particular OD gate. So if you want to eliminate it, what you do is you just export this table to CSV and then monkey around with it in Excel or Tableau or whatever.
what we ended up doing, I think, was we converted all those, I guess those are trips, into percentages to then apply to where the volumes would then be diverted. It's different.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's simple math. Yeah, it's simple math from that perspective because you have the total count and yeah, but another way of playing with it. All right, we are past our lunch break. So really quickly, Mary, what's next steps? What are we going to do? We're going to have lunch.
Yes.
How long is lunch? 1 hour? Okay, so we have till 1. Can we eat lunch in here? We can eat lunch in here, back at our desk. You can ask me questions. I'll probably just nibble on my chips. I'm hoping there's chips in that box.
Yeah, I think before we do that, we want to get a word from our sponsor.
Yes.
So I'm going to make him stand in the way of your lunch purposefully. But I think as we're coming up,
Oh, there is a sponsor.
I think it's important to note, right, what we talked about, and I think there were some great questions about this, right, about, hey, how many trips are we getting? What does that mean? These are captured trips versus modeled trips. And this will certainly get into the afternoon. All these various data sets build and work with one another, right? There is not one that is better than the other one, right? So when we're talking about volume estimation, modeling stuff up, modeling stuff down, you very much, and I'll use trips as my example, you very much need your core background of volume capture, temporary counts, permanent counts, to make sure that you can actually see what's going on the roadway so that you can scale up, scale down, factor across the year, because if that data was captured in September and you're trying to look at something over the summer, obviously your volumes change. So I think, again, I share that because Eric's going to talk to you about all traffic data and RECORE, and it is not to say that any of this is a replacement. In fact, it is very much, all these things work very much in parallel with each other. So let me pause, hand it over, and then I'll get off my soapbox and get back on in a few seconds.
For those of you who do not know me, I got one here too, so I'm being stereoed then. Two of them is stereo, left and right.
That's right.
So, I'm Mark Bovine. I've been around in this industry with data collection for 20 plus years now. The reason we kind of have transitioned a little bit over into the ITS field of things is because a couple years ago we were bought out by a company called RECORE. They're an AI transportation type company. Myself, I still am doing temporary data collection here in all of the Southeast. RECORE deals a little bit more with some permanent stations and other types of data collection. I know one of the things that RECORE does is they ingest a lot of data from Waze, from OEMs, all kinds of different things, and they're holding it also, and they can give you lots and lots of scenarios. One of our main products that we sell is a software system that goes internally into a TMC, and basically, like I think you were saying, that through just looking at lenses in a camera, the AI system in that software can determine whether or not there's a slowdown, a wreck, whatever. They've done a little bit of study, and then it can increase the hero units up to about 9 minutes to get to that thing, because somebody can look at the screen fairly quickly and say, oh, we've got an overturned vehicle. They're not having to verify from either finding that on a camera or getting the ingest of 14 different thousand calls coming in. Hey, we got a wreck. Well, what type of wreck? Are we going northbound? Are we going southbound, eastbound, westbound? That person in the TMC center can actually look at it and get hero, fire, rescue, or whatever out there at a lot quicker pace than that. So, but like I said, RECORE is kind of our big thing up here. I don't do a lot with RECORE. We just we're here to help sponsor ITS and to help, because many of you have helped us throughout the years with all traffic data. All traffic data is still doing its same thing. Also, if you've got questions about RECORE, feel free to. I'll be around through lunch. I'm going to head out after lunch, but ask me. If I don't have the answer, I'll find somebody that can get you the answer for that. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, thank you to All Traffic Data and RECORE for sponsoring. Like every month, their sponsorship means a lot. It's what helps us keep our costs down and make lunch possible. Before I let you go now, I'm standing in the way. ITS World Congress is here in Atlanta, August 24th through the 28th. If you have not yet signed up, I very much recommend that you do that. It is a bit pricey, but there are day passes, there are like event hall passes only. There are a lot of different options to make it budget friendly for whatever you can afford. There's something like 8,000 to 10,000 people that show up for this, so it's a pretty big deal. A lot of big name companies that I think, frankly, as much as I'd love for them to show up at an ITS Georgia meeting, will probably never show up at an ITS Georgia meeting. So this is a great opportunity to meet with them, network with them, and really broaden out your own individual groups. While you're out grabbing lunch, I'll have this up. There's been lots of really great questions. I do want to leave you with the fact that there, beyond the training that Rick is doing, there is free training that goes on every single month that's put on by the CATT Lab for different tools that are going on. There's really wonderful tutorials that are online. They're in like 5 to 10 minute chunks, so they're really, really, really digestible to help you set up these queries for all the various pieces. I'm going to keep this up just so that you can see it, but this is where you can go and get those hyperlinks to go find those things, make your life a little bit easier. So with that, I'll zip my lips. If you go right out this doorway where Mary is, you'll just kind of snake around, and lunch is in the break room, and we can come back in here and eat.
Awesome.
So
Thank you, ma'am.
with lunch in the break room, it's Chick-fil-A. Regular spicy sandwiches are on your right, the regulars on your left. Vegetarians on another table with the veggie wraps, and there are some chicken wraps on the other table. So that would go in and